The council chamber on Thesara Prime was built from living crystal that sang when light passed through it. Today, the song was mournful. Elder Ambassador Kethra stood before the assembled leaders of 17 different species, and her hands trembled as she activated the holographic display. 3 more worlds have fallen, she said quietly. The display showed a map of their territory. Red markers spread across it like a disease. The Krell swarm consumed everything. No survivors, no structures left standing, just empty rock. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Velrim Collective had fought the swarm for 5 years. They had lost every major battle. Their greatest scientists couldn't create weapons fast enough. Every time they developed a new defense, the swarm adapted within weeks. It was like fighting water with a net. Council member Vexal spoke up, his voice tight with fear. "How many citizens did we lose?" 4 billion, Kethra answered. "The swarm doesn't take prisoners. It consumes everything organic and moves on." Another council member, a floating gas being named Shirma, pulsed with distress. "Our military projects, we have 8 months before they reach our core worlds. After that, extinction." The word hung in the air like poison. Extinction. The Velrim had existed for over 10,000 years. They had built cities that touched the clouds. They had created art that could make stone weep. They had 27 different languages and a culture based on knowledge and peace. And now all of it would end because they had never learned to be truly violent. Kethra looked around the chamber. She saw fear in every face. The Velrim were teachers, builders, and explorers. They could negotiate with anyone, find common ground with any species. But the Krell didn't negotiate. The Krell only consumed. "There might be another option," she said slowly. "But it frightens me more than the swarm." She activated another display. This one showed a star chart with a region marked in warning colors. The quarantine zone. The ancient guardians sealed this area 3,000 years ago. They left warnings in every language. Stay away. Dangerous species within. Do not make contact. "You can't be serious," Vexal said. "Those warnings exist for a reason." "I found something in the old archives," Kethra continued. She had spent weeks searching through forgotten data, looking for anything that might help. Archaeological records from the edge of the zone. The species inside called themselves humans. The Guardians locked them away because they were too aggressive, too persistent. They wouldn't submit to anyone. "So you want to release monsters to fight monsters?" Shirma asked. Kethra's tentacles curled with stress. "I want to find someone who can fight. We can't. Our warriors are defensive. We retreat when we take casualties. We value every life too much to risk them in desperate battles. But these humans, the records say they fought each other for thousands of years. They nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times. The Guardians feared them." "And you think they'll help us?" Vexal demanded. "Why would a violent species care about our survival?" "I don't know," Kethra admitted. "But I do know we'll be extinct in 8 months if we do nothing. Maybe these humans will destroy us. Maybe they'll ignore us. Or maybe, just maybe, they'll be the angels we need." The council argued for 3 hours. Some wanted to flee to distant galaxies. Others wanted to surrender and hope the swarm would show mercy. But most understood the truth. There was nowhere to run. The swarm would follow, and the swarm knew no mercy. Finally, they voted. The decision was close, but it passed. They would send a delegation to the Sol system. They would break the ancient quarantine. They would make contact with humanity. Kethra volunteered to lead the mission. If this decision destroyed her people, she wanted to face the consequences herself. They prepared a small diplomatic ship loaded with gifts and information about the Velrim culture. They recorded messages in every language they could create, begging for help. The journey took 3 weeks. The ship approached the edge of the quarantine zone slowly, broadcasting peace on all frequencies. Kethra expected automated defense systems, ancient weapons that would destroy them for breaking the seal. Instead, there was nothing, just empty space and distant stars. Then, as they crossed the boundary, everything changed. 5 human ships appeared from nowhere. They were dark gray, built for function rather than beauty. Weapons covered their hulls. They moved with predatory grace, surrounding the Velrim vessel in seconds. A voice came over the communication system, speaking in a language the Velrim computers had to translate. "Unknown vessel, you have entered United Earth Defense Force territory. Identify yourself immediately or we will open fire." Kethra's hands shook as she activated the response. "We are the Velrim Collective. We come in peace. We need help. Please, we mean no harm." There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, calmer but still cautious. "Stand by for boarding. Do not power weapons. Do not attempt to flee. Any hostile action will result in your immediate destruction." The largest human ship moved closer. Kethra could see figures moving behind its windows. She tried to imagine what they looked like. The old records had some images, but they were corrupted and unclear. Were humans large or small? Did they have claws, fangs? A docking tube extended from the human ship and attached to theirs with a solid clunk. Kethra stood at the airlock, trying to appear dignified and peaceful. Behind her, the other 3 Velrim delegates huddled together in fear. The airlock opened. A human stepped through. She was smaller than Kethra expected, standing on 2 legs with 2 arms. Her skin was tan, her hair was black and tied back, and her eyes were dark and intelligent. She wore a dark blue uniform with symbols Kethra didn't recognize. She carried no visible weapons, but moved with absolute confidence. "I am Captain G1 of the UEDF Relentless," the human said. Her voice was calm and controlled. "You violated a 3,000-year-old quarantine. This better be good." Kethra bowed deeply, a gesture of respect in Velrim culture. "Captain G1, my people are dying. A force called the Krell Swarm is destroying everything we have. We looked through the old records and found warnings about your species. We came hoping to find angels who might save us." Captain G1's expression didn't change. She studied Kethra for a long moment, and the Velrim ambassador felt like she was being measured and weighed. Finally, the human spoke. "We're not angels," G1 said quietly. "But show me this threat. If it's real, we'll handle it." The way she said "handle it" made Kethra's blood run cold. There was something in the human's tone, something hard and unyielding. This wasn't the voice of a savior. This was the voice of a predator who had just been told about prey. Kethra realized with sudden clarity that they had made a terrible mistake. They had come looking for angels. But humanity was something far more dangerous. Captain G1 brought the Velrim delegation to Earth's orbital station above their homeworld. Kethra stared through the observation window at the blue and green planet below. It looked peaceful, beautiful, not like a world that had spawned something the ancient guardians feared. The station was massive, larger than any Velrim construction. Humans moved through the corridors with purpose, barely glancing at the alien visitors. They wore different uniforms in different colors. Some carried weapons openly. Others worked on computer terminals or moved equipment. Everyone seemed busy, focused, efficient. G1 led them to a conference room where a human woman in a white uniform waited. She was older than G1, with gray streaks in her black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This is Admiral Yunji," G1 said. "She commands Earth's expeditionary fleet. Admiral, these are the Velrim. They claim something is destroying their civilization." Admiral Yunji gestured to seats around a large table. "Sit, tell me everything." Kethra activated her data device and projected images into the air. This is the Krell swarm. We don't know where they came from. They appeared 5 years ago and started consuming planets. They take all organic matter and leave nothing behind. No life, no soil, just bare rock. The images showed worlds before and after the swarm. Green planets turned gray and dead. Cities that had stood for centuries reduced to nothing. They adapt to everything we do, Kethra continued. We create a new weapon. They survive it within weeks. We develop new armor. They break through it. We've lost hundreds of billions of people. We have maybe 8 months before they reach our core worlds and finish us. Admiral Yunji watched the images without expression. Next to her, a younger human man in a gray uniform studied the data intently. He had a sharp face and quick eyes that darted over every detail. "Lieutenant Minho," the admiral said. "Analysis." The young man tapped on his computer tablet. The swarm operates on hive intelligence, central command structure with distributed processing. They adapt through collective learning. Each drone feeds information to the whole. He looked up at Kethra. "Show me your battle reports." Kethra sent over the files. Minho read through them quickly, his expression growing more intense. "You've been fighting defensively, evacuating worlds, falling back, trying to minimize casualties." "Of course," Kethra said. "Every life matters. We can't just throw our people away." "That's why you're losing," Minho said bluntly. "The swarm doesn't care about losses. It learns from every engagement. You retreat, it advances. You save your forces, it grows stronger." He turned to the admiral. "They need a complete strategic shift, offensive operations, acceptable casualty rates, persistent pressure." Kethra felt sick. "Acceptable casualties? These are people's lives." A new voice spoke from the doorway. A woman in a white coat entered carrying a data pad. She had kind eyes behind her glasses. "I'm Dr. Sora, xenobiology specialist. I've been reviewing the information about the Krell." She sat down and pulled up images of Earth's history. "Let me explain something about humans. We evolved as persistence hunters. On our world, we weren't the strongest or fastest, but we never gave up. We would chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to work together, to plan, to adapt constantly. Then we started fighting each other," she continued. The images showed human wars, cities burning, battlefields covered in bodies, weapons that could destroy entire regions. For thousands of years, we perfected the art of war. We fought over territory, resources, ideas, everything. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. Kethra stared at the images in horror. "How many died in these wars?" "Hundreds of millions," Dr. Sora said quietly. "But we learned. We learned how to win wars through overwhelming force, through tactics and strategy, through never accepting defeat, through being more stubborn than our enemies." Admiral Yunji leaned forward. "The Guardians locked us away because we scared them. Not because we were evil, but because we were dangerous. We fight dirty. We don't give up. We turn every loss into a lesson and come back stronger." She pulled up a star map. "Your swarm adapts to threats. Good. So do we. Your enemies learn from every battle. So do we. But here's the difference. We've been fighting enemies who can think, plan, and hate for our entire history. Your swarm is just an animal following programming." Kethra felt something between hope and terror. "Will you help us?" "That depends," the admiral said. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at Earth. "What happens after? If we destroy the swarm, what then? Do you try to lock us away again? Do you fear us?" "I already fear you," Kethra admitted. "But I fear extinction more." Admiral Yunji turned back to face her. "Here's the truth. If the swarm is as dangerous as you say, they're a threat to everyone, including us. We can't let something like that exist in the galaxy. So yes, we'll help. Not because we're angels or saviors. We'll help because it's the smart thing to do." She pressed a button on the table. A holographic display appeared. showing fleets of human ships, hundreds of them, all armed, all ready. I can mobilize 200 warships and 50,000 Marines within a week. We'll need detailed maps of swarm territory, information on their fleet compositions, everything you have. You can move that many ships so quickly? Kethra asked in amazement. Lieutenant Minho smiled for the first time. It wasn't a friendly smile. We've been preparing for interstellar war since we broke the quarantine 10 years ago. We knew eventually someone or something would notice us. We decided to be ready. Another human entered, a tall man with gray hair and a stern face. His uniform had more medals than anyone else's. I'm Fleet Admiral Tai Yang. The Council has approved military intervention. I'll be leading the first contact war fleet personally. He looked at Kethra directly. Understand something. When humans go to war, we go all in. We will use nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological agents, kinetic bombardment. Whatever it takes to win, we don't fight fair. We fight to completely destroy the enemy. If that bothers you, speak now. Kethra thought about her people, about the billions already dead, about the children who would never grow up if the swarm wasn't stopped. Do whatever you need to do. Just stop them. Good, Taeyang said. He activated a communication device. All fleets, this is Fleet Admiral Taeyang. Begin mobilization protocols. We deploy in 72 hours. Our mission is simple. Total elimination of the Krell swarm threat. No mercy, no retreat. We end this. Through the window, Kethra watched as Earth's orbital shipyards came alive. Ships began moving, taking positions. Smaller craft ferried supplies and personnel. Everything moved with practiced efficiency. This wasn't a species preparing for war. This was a species that had never stopped being ready for it. Captain Jiwon stood next to her. You came looking for angels, she said quietly. I hope you can live with what you found instead. Kethra watched the warships gather and felt a chill run through her entire body. These humans weren't angels. Angels were merciful, gentle, kind. These were something else entirely. These were predators who had learned to work together. Warriors who had spent their entire existence preparing for exactly this moment. The Velrim had looked for salvation. Instead, they had unleashed something the galaxy had kept locked away for good reason. Kethra could only hope that humanity's violence would be directed at the right target. Because if these humans ever decided to turn against their allies, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. The human fleet arrived at the Sarah Prime, exactly when they said they would. Kethra watched from the orbital defense platform as 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They moved like a school of fish, each ship knowing exactly where to be. Velrim Command, this is Admiral Yunji. We're in position. Where is the swarm? Kethra's voice shook as she answered. They're 3 hours away. Our sensors detect over 500 swarm vessels approaching. Understood. All human ships. Battle formation Delta. Prepare all weapon systems. The human ships spread out, creating layers of defense around the planet. Kethra had studied the human battle plans during the journey here. She still didn't fully understand them. The humans didn't just plan to defend, they planned to attack, counterattack, and pursue. They wanted to destroy every swarm ship completely. Captain Jiwon's ship, the Relentless, took position at the front of the formation. Through the communication channel, Kethra heard Jiwon addressing her crew. This is our first real battle against an alien threat. Make it count. Show them why the Guardians locked us away. Show them what humans do to monsters. The crew's response was a unified shout. No mercy for monsters. Kethra shivered. These humans treated war like a celebration. The swarm appeared on sensors, hundreds of ships, all different sizes. They had been built from parts of conquered vessels, grown from organic matter, adapted from captured technology. They looked like nightmares, all wrong angles and dark surfaces. Range in 2 minutes, Lieutenant Minho reported from the tactical station aboard the flagship. They're not slowing down. Typical swarm behavior. They'll ram us if they can't shoot us. Let them try, Admiral Yunji said calmly. All ships fire on my mark. Nuclear payloads first. Let's see how they adapt to old-fashioned fusion. Kethra wanted to protest. Nuclear weapons near a populated planet? But she bit back her words. She had asked for human help. This was what that meant. Mark! The human fleet fired as one. Missiles streaked through space, hundreds of them. The swarm tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. The first wave hit, and space lit up with dozens of nuclear explosions. Swarm ships vanished in balls of fire. But the swarm kept coming. The survivors adapted, changing their formation, adjusting their shields. They returned fire with biological weapons, living projectiles that tried to latch onto human ships. Rotating defense frequencies, Minho reported. Deploying point defense lasers, chemical countermeasures ready. The human ships shifted their tactics immediately. Where nuclear weapons had worked before, now they used lasers. Then kinetic projectiles, then electromagnetic pulses. Every minute, they changed their approach. They're trying to adapt, Minho said, but we're not giving them time to learn. A group of swarm ships broke through the human lines, heading straight for Thessera Prime. Kethra's heart stopped. If they reached the planet, billions would die. Captain Jiwan's voice came over the channel, completely calm. Relentless to all ships in Group 3. Follow me, we're going to stop them. 6 human ships broke formation and accelerated toward the swarm vessels. They didn't try to match speed or maneuver carefully. They just flew straight at the enemy, firing everything they had. Brace for impact, Jiwan said to her crew. We're ramming if we have to. The human ships crashed into the swarm formation like hammers. Some fired their engines at full power and literally rammed the enemy vessels, destroying both ships in explosions of metal and fire. Others got close enough to use short-range weapons that turned swarm ships into clouds of debris. All 6 human ships were destroyed. But the swarm vessels never reached the planet. Kethra stared in horror. Those crews had sacrificed themselves without hesitation. How could anyone value victory more than their own lives? Group 3 is down, Admiral Yunji reported. Her voice remained steady. Group 7, move to cover that sector. Continue offensive operations. They're starting to retreat. She was right. The swarm was pulling back, something Kethra had never seen before. They always pushed forward no matter the cost. But faced with an enemy that matched their aggression and exceeded their willingness to die, they retreated. All ships pursue, Fleet Admiral Taeyang ordered. Don't let them regroup. Drive them out of this system. I want detailed scans of every ship we destroy. Learn everything about them. The battle lasted 6 more hours. By the end, the swarm had lost over 400 ships. The humans had lost 37. Those numbers horrified Kethra. 37 ships meant thousands of human lives. But when she mentioned this to Admiral Yunji, the response chilled her. We knew the cost when we deployed. Every one of those crews volunteered. They died protecting your world. Honor them by letting us finish the job. The surviving human ships began landing ground forces on Thessera Prime. The swarm had managed to deploy some of their drones to the surface before retreating. Now those drones were building hive structures, spreading across the land like an infection. Sergeant Nari led the first assault team down. She was a small woman with burn scars on her arms and an expression that showed no fear. Her unit carried weapons that made Velreem military equipment look like toys. Kethra watched through drone cameras as the human Marines advanced on a swarm hive. The structure was 20 stories tall, made of hardened biological matter and surrounded by thousands of Krell drones. That's suicide, a Velreem military commander said. They need at least 5 times as many soldiers. Sergeant Nari obviously disagreed. Her unit spread out and began their attack. They used flamethrowers that turned Krell drones into burning torches. They threw grenades that exploded with chemicals that dissolved the hive structure. When drones got close, the Marines shot them with weapons that literally tore the creatures apart. But the swarm kept coming. For every drone that died, 2 more appeared. The Marines started taking casualties. Kethra watched in horror as a drone grabbed a Marine and started to consume him. His teammates didn't even hesitate. They shot both the drone and their friend, killing them together to prevent the swarm from learning from his biology. "Pull back!" Kethra transmitted to Sergeant Nari. "You're going to lose your entire unit!" Nari's response was harsh and angry. "We don't retreat! We finish the mission!" The Marines fought for 3 more hours. By the end, half of Nari's unit was dead or wounded, but the hive was destroyed, burned to ash along with every drone near it. Kethra met Sergeant Nari at the landing zone as the survivors came back. The Marine was covered in blood, both human and alien. Her armor was cracked. Her face showed exhaustion, but her eyes still burned with determination. "Why?" Kethra asked. "Why do you fight like that? Don't you value your own lives?" Nari looked at her for a long moment. Then she pointed at the city in the distance, where millions of Velrim lived. "You asked us to protect them. We keep our promises. Every human who died today died so your people could live. Don't insult their sacrifice by asking why." She walked past, heading to where medics waited. Kethra watched her go and felt something break inside. These humans were terrifying, brutal. They fought with a ferocity that made the swarm look gentle. But they fought for others. They died for strangers. Admiral Yunji's voice came over the communication system. "The Sara Prime is secure. All swarm forces eliminated. We're establishing defensive positions and will begin pursuit of the retreating enemy forces tomorrow. Fleet Admiral Tai Yang, your orders?" "Hunt them down," Tai Yang responded. "Every ship, every drone. We end the swarm completely." Kethra looked up at the sky where human warships now patrolled. The Velrim had asked for angels to save them. Instead, they had found relentless guardians who would kill anything that threatened those under their protection. She wasn't sure if she should feel grateful or terrified. Perhaps both. The human offensive began 3 days after the Battle of Thesara Prime. Admiral Yunji didn't wait for the swarm to regroup or adapt. She took the fleet deep into territory the Krell had controlled for years, hunting them world by world. Kethra traveled with the flagship, watching how humans waged war. It was nothing like Velrim military doctrine. The Velrim defended, evacuated, and minimized risk. Humans attacked, pursued, and took calculated risks constantly. "Target system ahead," Lieutenant Minho reported. "Swarm presence detected. 3 hive worlds, approximately 2 billion drones total." "Standard assault protocol," Admiral Yunji ordered. "Captain Sunho, take your reconnaissance team in first. I want to know exactly what we're facing." Captain Sunho was a thin man with quick movements and sharp eyes. He commanded a stealth ship called the Shadow. Kethra watched on the monitors as his ship slipped past swarm defenses, getting close enough to scan the hive structures. "Multiple hive mines detected," Sunho transmitted back. "They're building ships. Looks like they're preparing for a counterattack." "Then we hit them before they're ready," Yunji decided. "All ships, attack formation. Bombardment pattern 7. Let's turn those worlds into dead rock." Kethra couldn't stay quiet. There might be survivors down there, Velrim citizens who were taken by the swarm. Yunji turned to look at her. The Admiral's expression wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. "The swarm consumes organic matter completely. If your people were taken here years ago, they're dead. All that's left is enemy infrastructure. We remove it." The fleet attacked. Human ships rained down fire on the 3 planets. They used weapons Kethra had never imagined. Kinetic projectiles that hit with the force of nuclear bombs. Orbital lasers that burned through hive structures. missiles that released chemicals specifically designed to break down swarm biology. The planets burned. Hive structures collapsed. Millions of drones died. When it was over, 3 worlds that had been covered in swarm presence were reduced to smoking wastelands. "Move to the next system," Yunji ordered. "Keep the pressure on. Don't give them time to think." This became the pattern. The human fleet would locate swarm presence, attack immediately, destroy everything, and move on. They fought every single day. No breaks, no rest periods. Just constant, relentless pressure. Kethra noticed something changing in the swarm's behavior. They started avoiding systems where human forces operated. When human ships appeared, swarm vessels would retreat before engaging. The hive mind that had conquered dozens of species was becoming afraid. "They're learning," Minho explained one day in the strategy room. "Not adapting to our weapons. Learning to fear us. The swarm has a survival instinct. It's realizing that fighting us costs more than it gains." "Good," said Major Yuna, a Marine officer with cold eyes. "Fear is a weapon. Let them run. We'll follow them to the edge of the galaxy if we have to." Yuna's unit had started doing something that disturbed Kethra deeply. After every battle, they would plant markers on the conquered worlds, metal posts with human symbols carved into them, messages broadcast on all frequencies. "What do they say?" Kethra asked. "We were here. We will return. Run," Yuna translated. "Psychological warfare. We want the swarm to know that nowhere is safe, that humans will hunt them forever." It was working. Swarm forces began abandoning systems before humans even arrived. They were retreating toward their core territories, consolidating their forces. "They're going to make a stand," Lieutenant Minho predicted. "Gather everything they have left and fight one massive battle." "Let them," Admiral Unji said. "The more of them in one place, the easier to eliminate." But the humans didn't just rely on military force. Dr. Gina, a biological warfare specialist, had been studying captured swarm samples. She worked in a laboratory aboard the flagship, surrounded by security measures and biohazard protocols. Kethra visited her laboratory one day. Dr. Gina looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. But she smiled when she saw the Velrim ambassador. "I think I've found something," Gina said. She pulled up a holographic display of swarm neural structure. "The drones are all connected to hive minds. Those hive minds coordinate through a specific frequency. If we can disrupt that frequency, we can break the connection." "Would that kill them?" Kethra asked. "No. Worse. It would leave them mindless. They'd just wander around until they died from lack of coordination. No direction, no purpose, just biological machines without programming." Kethra felt sick. "That sounds cruel." Gina's expression hardened. "You know what's cruel. What they did to your people. Billions consumed alive. Entire civilizations erased. The swarm doesn't deserve mercy. It deserves extinction." She continued working, testing different frequencies, different methods of disruption. After 2 weeks, she had a working prototype. A weapon that could broadcast a neural disruptor signal across an entire star system. "We'll need to test it," Admiral Yunji said when Gina presented her findings. "Find a system with swarm presence and deploy the weapon." They chose a system with a minor swarm outpost. Only a few million drones. When they activated the disruptor, the effect was immediate and horrible. The drones stopped coordinating. They bumped into each other, wandered in circles, and eventually just shut down. "It works," Gina reported. "We can scale it up. If we deploy this at their core territories, we can break the entire swarm network." Fleet Admiral Taiyang approved the weapon for mass production. Within days, every human ship carried disruptor missiles. They were ready for the final confrontation. During this time, Kethra spent more time with the human crews. She wanted to understand them. How could they be so violent and yet so protective, so brutal and yet so determined to save others? One evening, she sat in the mess hall aboard the Relentless. Marines gathered there after missions, eating, talking, and resting. She watched as Sergeant Nari sat with her surviving unit members. They told stories about the soldiers who had died. They laughed about good memories. They cried for friends lost. "You care about each other," Kethra said to Nari. "So why do you accept such heavy losses?" Nari looked at her with tired eyes. "Because that's what we do. Humans protect those who can't protect themselves. We fight so others don't have to. Every person in this fleet volunteered knowing they might die. We accepted that cost, because your people we never met before, needed help." She took a drink and continued. "My brother died in the Battle of Thesara Prime. He was on one of the ships that rammed the swarm. I'm angry about that. I'm sad. But I'm also proud. He died doing something that mattered. He died protecting billions of people. That means something." Kethra realized something then. Humans weren't cruel. They understood the value of life better than the Velrim did. The Velrim valued life so much, they couldn't risk it. Humans valued life so much they were willing to sacrifice their own to protect others. "The Guardians were wrong to lock you away," she said quietly. Nari smiled sadly. "Maybe. Or maybe they were smart. We're good allies but terrible enemies. You got lucky. You asked for help instead of declaring war. If the swarm could think clearly, maybe it would have tried negotiating instead of fighting, but it can't. So we'll erase it." Admiral Yunji's voice came over the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the Admiral. Our scouts have located the swarm's main concentration. They've gathered at their core worlds, every ship and drone they have left. We estimate 2,000 vessels and 15 billion drones." She paused. "Fleet Admiral Tai Yang is assembling every available human ship. We're going to hit them with everything we have. This is the final battle. We end the swarm completely, or we die trying. All ships prepare for maximum effort. We deploy in 48 hours. Kethra stood in the mess hall as human Marines began preparing their equipment. They checked weapons, repaired armor, and wrote messages to send home to families. They all knew many of them wouldn't survive. But not one of them asked to stay behind. The Velrim had looked for angels. They had found something different, something more dangerous and more dedicated. They had found humanity, relentless and unbreakable. The human fleet gathered at the edge of swarm space like a storm preparing to break. 300 warships, the largest military force Earth had ever assembled. Every available vessel had been called in for this final battle. Kethra watched from the flagship as they arrived, one by one, until space was filled with human warships. Fleet Admiral Tai Yang stood on the bridge of the supercarrier Indomitable, his command ship. He looked at the tactical display showing the swarm's core territory. 5 planets, all converted into massive hive worlds. 2,000 swarm vessels in orbit. 15 billion drones on the surfaces. "That's where they're making their stand," he said to Admiral Yunji, who had come aboard for the final briefing. "They've pulled back everything. Every ship, every drone. This is all that's left of the force that nearly destroyed the Velrim." "Then we end it here," Yunji replied simply. The battle plan was brutal and direct. The fleet would punch through the swarm's orbital defenses, deploy the neural disruptors to break their coordination, and then systematically destroy every hive structure on all 5 planets. No mercy, no hesitation. Complete eradication. Kethra attended the final briefing with the ship commanders. She watched as Lieutenant Minho outlined the strategy on holographic displays. Every commander asked questions, offered suggestions, and accepted their assignments. These humans planned war like the Velrim planned scientific research. Careful, detailed, thorough. "Expected casualties are 40%, Minho said without emotion. "This will be the costliest battle in human history. But if we succeed, the swarm dies completely. No survivors, no remnants, total extinction. 40%. That meant over 100 ships destroyed and thousands of humans dead. Kethra wanted to suggest finding another way, but she knew there wasn't one. The swarm would never surrender, never negotiate. The only way to stop them was complete destruction. Captain Jiwon caught her after the briefing. "You should transfer to a support vessel in the rear. This will be dangerous." "I need to see this," Kethra said. "My people need to know what happened here, what you did for us." Jiwon nodded. "Then stay on the bridge. Don't interfere. And if I tell you to get to an escape pod, you run. Understood?" "Understood." The fleet jumped into swarm space 12 hours later. The transition from faster-than-light travel to normal space was always disorienting, but this time was worse. They emerged directly into the swarm's core territory, surrounded by enemy vessels. "All ships, weapons free," Fleet Admiral Taeyang ordered calmly. "Begin the assault. For humanity, for the Velrim, for everyone the swarm has killed. No mercy for monsters." 300 human ships opened fire as one. Space lit up with weapons fire. Nuclear missiles, laser beams, kinetic projectiles moving at a fraction of light speed. The swarm fired back with biological weapons and captured technology from a dozen different species. Ships on both sides began dying immediately. Kethra watched human vessels explode, their crews dying in seconds. But for every human ship destroyed, the fleet destroyed 5 swarm vessels. The humans had better weapons, better tactics, and better training. "Deploy disruptor missiles," Admiral Yunji commanded from her position aboard the Relentless. "Target the hive minds on all 5 planets." Special missiles launched from a dozen different ships. They screamed through space, past the battle, straight toward the planets below. Swarm defenses tried to stop them, but the humans had planned for this. Fighter squadrons led by Major Yuna escorted the missiles, destroying anything that got close. The missiles reached the planets and detonated in the upper atmosphere. They released the neural disruptor signal that Dr. Gina had perfected. The effect was immediate. Swarm vessels in orbit suddenly lost coordination. They stopped moving in organized patterns and began drifting. On the planets below, 15 billion drones stopped receiving orders from their hive minds. They wandered aimlessly, bumping into structures, into each other, into nothing. "The swarm network is broken," Minho reported. "They're trying to adapt, but the disruption is too complete. They can't coordinate anymore." "Then we finish them," Taeyang said. "All ships, begin orbital bombardment. Turn those planets into glass." The human fleet poured fire down on the 5 hive worlds. They used every weapon they had. Where cities had once stood, now only craters remained. Where hives had grown, now only ash covered the ground. The bombardment continued for 6 hours without stopping. But the swarm wasn't completely beaten. Some vessels still had enough autonomous function to fight. They threw themselves at the human fleet in desperate attacks. One of them crashed into a human destroyer, destroying both ships in a massive explosion. Colonel Do-Yun led the ground assault on the largest hive world. His Marines dropped from orbit in armored pods, landing directly into the heart of swarm territory. Their mission was to destroy the central hive mind, the core intelligence that had commanded the entire swarm. Kethra watched through drone cameras as Do-Hyun's unit fought their way through mindless drones and collapsing structures. They used flamethrowers to burn through organic walls. They placed explosives on support pillars. They killed everything that moved. The central hive was a structure 3 miles tall, built from compressed biological matter and captured technology. It pulsed with sickly light as it tried to re-establish control over the swarm. Do-Hyun and his Marines reached the base and began planting nuclear charges. "Charges set," Do-Hyun reported. His voice was calm despite the fact that drones were swarming around his position. "Extracting now." "Negative," Taeyang's voice came back. "You won't make it out before detonation. The charges are on a timer." There was a pause. Then Do-Hyun laughed. Understood, sir. It's been an honor. Tell my family I love them. Your sacrifice will be remembered, Colonel. Do-hyun and his Marines held their position as the charges counted down. They fought off waves of drones, buying time for the nuclear weapons to detonate. When the timer reached 0, the entire structure exploded with the force of a dozen nuclear bombs. The central hive mind died, and with it, the last coordinated swarm intelligence. Kethra felt tears run down her face. She had watched those Marines joke and laugh just yesterday. Now they were gone, vaporized along with the swarm's brain. The battle continued for another day. The human fleet systematically destroyed every swarm vessel in orbit and every structure on the 5 planets. They didn't stop until sensors confirmed 0 swarm activity, 0 survivors, complete eradication. When it was finally over, the human fleet had lost 132 ships. 23,000 humans were dead. The casualties were worse than predicted, but the swarm was extinct, not defeated, not driven away. Extinct. Fleet Admiral Tae Yang addressed the surviving fleet. To all ships, all crews, you have accomplished something incredible. You have eliminated a threat that consumed entire civilizations. Yes, we paid a heavy price. But look at what we protected. The Velrim survive. Billions of innocent people will now live because of your courage. Every person who died today died a hero. The fleet began the journey back to Velrim space. It took weeks. During that time, Kethra spent hours talking with the survivors. She wanted to understand how they processed such losses. Sergeant Nari had survived, but half her unit hadn't. I miss them every day, she told Kethra. But I don't regret what we did. The swarm was a monster. Monsters need to be destroyed completely. But at such cost, Kethra said. Freedom has always had a cost, Nari replied. Your freedom. Your people's right to exist. That's worth dying for. That's worth killing for. When the fleet finally reached the Sarah Prime, millions of Velrim gathered to watch them arrive. The surviving human ships came home battered and scarred, but they came home victorious. Kethra met privately with Admiral Yoonji one last time before the humans returned to Earth. We asked for angels, she said. We asked for divine saviors to rescue us from evil. Instead, you brought destruction and death. Yes, Yoonji agreed. She didn't apologize or make excuses. But you saved us, Kethra continued. You fought for strangers. You died for people you'd never met. You destroyed a threat that would have consumed the entire galaxy eventually. Maybe you're not angels, but you're something better. You're real. Yoonji smiled slightly. Angels comfort the dying. We make sure people don't die in the first place. There's a difference. The Velrim Council offered humanity everything. Territory, resources, technology, political alliance. Admiral Yoonji accepted it all, but with conditions, mutual defense pacts, military coordination, shared intelligence. The Velrim would never be defenseless again, and humanity would help train them. But more importantly, word spread across the galaxy. Other species heard about what happened. They learned about the species that had been locked away, the humans who fought with relentless determination. Some species feared them. Others approached Earth seeking the same protection the Velrim had found. Humanity's isolation was over. They had proven themselves as guardians, protectors who would fight to the death for those under their care. They weren't always kind, they weren't gentle, but they were effective, loyal, and utterly unbreakable. Kethra watched the last human ships prepare to leave Velrim space. She thought about everything that had happened. The Velrim had nearly gone extinct because they valued peace too much. They had survived because humanity valued life enough to fight for it. The ancient guardians had locked humanity away because they were dangerous. They had been right. Humans were dangerous. But they were also capable of incredible compassion, loyalty, and sacrifice. They were the kind of dangerous the galaxy needed. They looked for angels, Kethra said to herself as the human fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel. But humanity sent relentless guardians instead. And maybe that's exactly what we needed. The ships disappeared, heading back to Earth. But Kethra knew they would return if called, because that's what humans did. They protected, they fought, they never gave up, and they never forgot those who needed them. The galaxy had changed, humanity was free, and anyone foolish enough to threaten human allies would learn the same lesson the swarm had learned. Humans didn't fight fair, they fought to win, and they always kept their promises.